Kicked out by his in-laws, a Delta Force veteran and his dog found a frozen cabin hiding $195 million. They told him he wasn't worth the dirt under their boots. Marcus Hale, 3 combat tours, a Silver Star, and a body held together by titanium pins and scar tissue, stood on the frozen porch of his dead wife's family estate, while her father threw his duffel bag into the snow. His military dog, a Belgian Malinois named Bishop, pressed against his bad leg. Marcus had buried their daughter 6 months ago. Cancer. She was 7. Now her grandparents wanted the house, the insurance money, and the dog. They got a judge to agree. What they didn't expect was Marcus walking 17 miles through a Wyoming blizzard to a derelict Forest Service cabin on federal land, and finding behind a collapsed wall $195 million in bearer bonds wrapped in plastic sheeting. What nobody expected was the woman already inside that cabin, Nora Fielding, wanted for embezzlement, hiding from the same people who'd framed her. She had the proof that could save him. He had the name that could destroy her. This is a story about 2 people too broken to trust, too cold to leave, and too hungry for each other to stay apart. She kept his secret. He kept her warm. And the people who threw him away learned exactly what a Delta Force operative does when you take everything from him. The cold had a sound. Nora Fielding had learned this over 11 days alone in the cabin. The cold didn't just bite, it hummed, a low-frequency vibration in the timber walls, in the frost-laced window glass, in her own teeth when she clenched them too hard. She heard it now, at 3 in the morning, curled in a sleeping bag on a bare mattress with her boots still on, her laptop dead, her phone dead, her hope a thin and flickering thing. She heard something else. Footsteps, heavy, irregular, one stride dragging, then a dog's whine. Urgent, not aggressive. Nora rolled off the mattress and grabbed the hatchet she kept beside the door. Her fingers were stiff. The hum of cold swallowed her breathing. She pressed her back to the wall beside the doorframe and waited. The door didn't crash in. It pushed open slowly, and a wall of frozen air entered first, carrying the smell of pine sap and blood. A dog came through, large, dark, moving with trained precision, sweeping the room with its nose before circling back to the door. Then the man. He was enormous. That was Nora's first coherent thought. Well over 6 feet, broad through the shoulders, wearing a military surplus parka crusted white with ice. His face was hidden behind a frozen balaclava. He took 1 step inside, and his left leg buckled. He caught himself on the doorframe with a gloved hand, and she saw his fingers shaking, not from fear. From cold so deep it had reached muscle, he didn't see her. He was looking at the dog. "Clear?" he said, his voice raw. The dog sat. The man took another step and went down on 1 knee. He stayed there, breathing hard, and the cold hummed between them like a living wire. Nora shifted her weight. The floorboard creaked. His head snapped toward her. She saw his eyes, dark, bloodshot, wild with the focus of a man who'd been operating on instinct for hours. His gaze dropped to the hatchet, then back to her face. He didn't move toward her. He didn't raise his hands. He just looked. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. His voice cracked on the last word. "I just need 4 hours." The dog whined again and pushed its head under the man's arm. He listed sideways, caught himself, and Nora saw the dark stain on his left thigh. Not blood from a wound, she realized. Old blood, a surgical scar that had split from the cold and the walking. She lowered the hatchet. Not because she trusted him, because he was dying on her floor and the cold was winning. 4 hours, she said. "Then you leave." He nodded once. Then his eyes rolled back and he collapsed. Nora stared at him for 6 full seconds. The dog looked at her. She looked at the dog. "Well," she said. She dragged him to the mattress. It took everything she had. He was solid, dead weight, his limbs rigid. The dog followed, circling, never getting in her way. She pulled the balaclava off his face and found hard features, a jaw darkened with days of stubble, a nose that had been broken at least twice. A scar ran from his left temple to his ear. His skin was gray with cold. She unzipped his parka and pulled it off his shoulders. Under it, a flannel shirt soaked with sweat and snowmelt. Under that, a thermal layer she had to peel away from skin that burned her fingers with its chill. She worked fast, mechanical, her own body shaking. She'd done wilderness first aid training once years ago before her life became spreadsheets and courtrooms and running. She knew the rules. Get him dry. Get him warm. Keep his core temperature from dropping further. She stripped him to his waist and wrapped him in the sleeping bag. His chest was a map of violence. Scars, old and surgical, some clearly from shrapnel, others from blades. She packed her extra clothes around him, pressed the one chemical hand warmer she had left against his sternum, and sat back on her heels. The dog lay down beside him and pressed its body against his side. "Good dog," Nora whispered. She didn't sleep. She sat against the opposite wall and watched them both, and listened to the cold hum, its patient, hungry note. He woke at dawn. Grey light through the frosted windows. Nora was boiling snow in a pot over the wood stove, the cabin's one functional amenity, and she heard his breathing change first, then the sleeping bag rustling, then the dog's tail thumping the floor. "The hatchet," he said. "Where is it?" She turned. He was sitting up, the sleeping bag pooled at his waist, and she watched his eyes track the room. Exits, windows, her position, the weapon, tactical, automatic. "By the stove," she said. "Where I can reach it." Something shifted in his face. Not a smile. An acknowledgement. "Fair. Your leg split open. I cleaned it, but you need stitches. I've had worse." He looked at the dog. Bishop. Status. The dog rose, stretched, and sat at attention. "He's fine," Nora said. "He ate the last of my jerky." The man looked at her then, really looked. She felt the inspection, not threatening but thorough. He saw the laptop bag, the burner phone on the shelf, the stack of printed documents she'd been too exhausted to hide. His expression didn't change. "My name is Marcus Hale," he said. "Staff Sergeant, retired." "Delta." She said nothing. "You've been here more than a week," he said. "The ash pile outside is too large for one night. You're not camping, you're hiding. And you walk 17 miles through a blizzard in -15 degrees, she said. "You're not hiking, you're running." Silence. The cold between them hummed. "Marcus," she said, testing it. "And you are?" "Nora." "Nora what?" "Just Nora." For now. He studied her for another moment. Then he nodded, respecting the boundary. "Just Nora." "Thank you for not letting me die." "Thank me by keeping your word." 4 hours. It's been 7. He pulled the sleeping bag aside and swung his legs to the floor. His left thigh was wrapped in strips of her undershirt. She'd torn it up for bandaging, and the movement made him go white. He stood anyway, took his weight, didn't fall. "I'll go," he said. "Where?" "I'll figure it out." "In what?" "You can't walk another mile on that leg." "I've done more on less." She believed him. That was the problem. She believed every word out of his mouth because he spoke them like they cost him something, and she was so tired of people who talked for free. "Stay," she said. Then quickly, "Not because you'll die out there, and your dog doesn't deserve that." Marcus looked at Bishop. Bishop looked at Nora. Marcus sat back down. "One condition," he said. "You tell me if I'm putting you in danger by being here." "You're not," she lied. The second night she heard him talking to Bishop in the dark. Low murmurs. She caught fragments. "Good boy and I know," and a name she didn't recognize. "Lily." He said it the way you say a word that has teeth inside it, carefully, bracing for the bite. On the third morning, 2 men came up the trail. Nora saw them through the window. Heavy coats, purposeful stride, one carrying a rifle. She recognized them. They worked for Victor Cahill, her former boss, the man who had stolen $195 million from a defense contractor's pension fund, laundered it through bearer bonds and hidden them somewhere in the Wyoming backcountry before framing her, his chief financial officer, for the entire theft. She'd come to this cabin because the GPS coordinates in Victor's encrypted files pointed here. She'd found the bonds behind a collapsed interior wall on her second day. She'd been trying to figure out how to get them to the FBI without getting killed ever since. "Get away from the window!" Marcus's voice behind her. She hadn't heard him move. He was standing, fully dressed, his weight on his good leg, and his eyes were on the two men outside with a focus that made the air in the cabin feel different. Compressed, dangerous. "Do you know them?" he asked. "They work for the man who's trying to kill me." He didn't ask for clarification. He didn't ask what she'd done. He put his hand on Bishop's collar and said, "Stay behind the stove. Don't move. Don't speak." Then he opened the door and stepped outside. Nora couldn't see what happened. She heard voices. Marcus's flat, controlled, giving nothing. The other men aggressive at first, then uncertain. A silence, then footsteps retreating, fast. Marcus came back inside. He closed the door and leaned against it, and his breath came short and ragged. "They won't come back today," he said. "Probably not tomorrow." "How?" "I told them this was federal land under active investigation, and I was the investigating officer. And they believed you. I showed them my military ID and my sidearm." He paused. "I didn't have to draw it. I just let them see it. You have a gun. I have several opinions about personal safety. The gun is one of them." He looked at her. "Nora, what did you do?" "Nothing. That's the problem." On the fourth night, she woke to his hand on her shoulder, not grabbing, resting. The weight of his palm through her sweater was the first warmth she'd felt in weeks that didn't come from a fire. "You were having a nightmare," he said. He was kneeling beside her, and in the dark his face was all shadow and angles and those bloodshot eyes that never fully closed, even in sleep. Bishop sat behind him, alert. "I'm fine," she said. "You were calling for someone." "David." Her chest seized. David Park, her former colleague, the one who discovered what Victor was doing and tried to help her. Victor had him killed 3 months ago, made it look like a hiking accident. "David was my friend," she said. "He's dead." Marcus's hand stayed on her shoulder. "May I sit?" "Yes." He sat beside her on the mattress, his back against the wall, his bad leg extended. The cold hummed around them. Bishop lay across their feet. "My daughter's name was Lily," Marcus said. "She was 7. Leukemia. She died in a hospital bed holding my hand, and her last word was Daddy, and I have not spoken that sentence out loud to another human being until right now." Nora didn't touch him. She didn't offer comfort. She sat beside him in the dark and let his grief have the space it needed, and when he finally exhaled, a long shattered sound, she said, "Tell me about her." He talked for 3 hours. She listened to every word. By the 5th day, the cabin had become a country with 2 citizens and a constitution they wrote in glances. He chopped wood. She maintained the fire. He checked the perimeter every 4 hours. She sorted through the documents she'd brought, financial records, transaction logs, the encrypted files she'd cracked on her own before her laptop died. They moved around each other with a precise awareness that Nora felt in her skin like a low electrical current. That evening, he came in from the cold with frost in his hair and blood on his knuckles. He'd split wood until his hands cracked, and she grabbed his wrist without thinking. "Let me see." He went still, absolutely still. She felt his pulse under her thumb, hard and fast, and she looked up and his eyes were on her face with an expression she hadn't seen before. Not tactical, not guarded, hungry, starving. "Tell me to let go," she said, "and I will." "Don't let go." She cleaned his hands with melted snow. She wrapped them with strips of cloth. The whole time he watched her, and the cold in the cabin lost its hum and became something else, a silence that held its breath. That night, he didn't go to his side of the cabin. He sat on the mattress beside her, their shoulders touching through layers of fabric, and Bishop settled at the foot, and the fire cracked low in the stove, throwing copper light across the walls. "I want to be honest with you," Marcus said. "My body has wanted to touch you since the second morning. My hands have been fists for 3 days because of it. I will not act on it unless you ask me to, and I will not be angry if you don't. Nora's heart hammered. The copper light moved across his face, his scarred jaw, the cords of his neck where his pulse beat visible and fast. She could feel the heat radiating from his body. He ran hot, always, even in this frozen place, and she had been so cold for so long. "I'm asking," she said. He turned toward her. His hand came up and his fingers touched her jaw, just his fingertips, and he held there, waiting. "Tell me exactly what you want," he said. "I won't guess. Your mouth on mine, your hands under my clothes. I want to feel something that isn't fear." He kissed her. Slow, deliberate, his fingers sliding from her jaw into her hair, tilting her head back. His mouth was warm, so warm, and the taste of him was salt and cold air and coffee from the last packet they'd split that morning. She grabbed the front of his shirt and pulled. He made a sound against her mouth, low, involuntary, and she felt it vibrate through her chest. His other hand found her hip, gripping through her sweater, and she arched into him. "This," she said against his lips. "More." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "The sweater?" Off. He peeled it over her head. The cold hit her bare arms and she gasped, but his hands were there immediately, sliding up her sides, rough palms on her ribs, his thumbs tracing the band of her bra. The contrast was devastating. Cold air, hot hands. She shivered, and he pulled her against his chest, and his body was a furnace. "God," she whispered. "Tell me if anything is wrong. Nothing is wrong. Take your shirt off." He pulled his thermal over his head in one motion, and she put her hands on his chest and felt the scars under her palms. Ridges and smooth patches, the hard plane of muscle beneath. He was trembling, not from cold. She pushed him back onto the mattress and straddled his hips, and his hands came to her thighs, steadying her, and his breathing was ragged. She reached behind her back and unclasped her bra and let it fall. "Look at me," she said. He looked. His jaw tightened. His hands tightened on her thighs. "Nora," he said. Just her name. But he said it like a man who'd been walking through a desert and finally heard water. She leaned down and kissed him again, and this time there was nothing slow about it. His arms came around her back and he rolled them, pressing her into the mattress, his weight on his forearms, his hips settling between her thighs. She felt him against her, hard, urgent, his breath hot against her neck. "Can I?" His mouth on her collarbone, his fingers at the waistband of her thermal leggings. Yes. He stripped the leggings down her legs and his mouth followed, her hip, her thigh, the inside of her knee. Each kiss a question, each spot a place she let him claim. She was shaking now, not from cold. He came back up her body, his dog tags dragging cool across her stomach, and she hooked her fingers in his waistband. "These two," she said. He pushed them off and came back to her naked and scarred and beautiful in the copper firelight. She ran her hands down his back and felt the muscles tighten under her fingers. He pressed his forehead to hers. "I haven't done this since before Lily was born," he said. "I might be—" "Marcus." "Yeah. Stop talking." She pulled him down and wrapped her legs around him and guided him, and when he pushed into her, slow, watching her face, she made a sound she didn't recognize. Not pain, not relief, something between prayer and surrender. He stopped. She gripped his shoulders. "Don't stop." He moved, and she matched him, and the cold had no sound anymore. There was only his breathing and hers, the creak of the mattress, the soft, desperate noises she made that she couldn't control. His mouth on her throat, her nails on his back, his hand finding hers and lacing their fingers together against the mattress above her head. He held her hand while he moved inside her, and she came apart with her face pressed against his neck, biting down to keep from screaming, and he followed her over the edge with a groan that shook through both their bodies. He stayed, forehead against her shoulder, breathing hard. She ran her fingers through his hair and felt his heartbeat against her chest, slowing by degrees. Then he lifted his head. "Was that? If you ask me if that was okay, I will hit you." He almost smiled. Almost. The corner of his mouth moved, and she touched it with her thumb. Then he pulled away, sat up, reached for his clothes. "Where are you going?" The perimeter needs checking. Marcus. It's 2 a.m. I know. He pulled on his shirt without looking at her. I'll be back. He left. Bishop stayed. The cold crept back in, humming. At dawn, he still hadn't returned. Nora dressed, fed Bishop, and stood at the window watching the tree line. She saw his tracks leading east. She bit her lip until it bled. He came back at noon, stood in the doorway, didn't speak. "You're an idiot," she said. "Probably. Get inside." He came in. He stood by the stove and wouldn't look at her. She recognized the posture. Shame. Not of what they'd done. Of wanting it too much. "I'm going to say something," Nora said, "and you're going to listen. Last night was the first time in 2 years I felt like a human being instead of a case file. If you're going to punish yourself for making me feel that way, do it outside. But if you're staying, sit down and drink this coffee and stop treating me like a mistake." He sat. He drank the coffee. His eyes found hers over the rim of the cup and held. Later that afternoon, Nora was reorganizing the bond documents when a voice came through the trees. Marge Winterbottom, a retired Forest Service ranger who lived in a cabin 3 miles south and had brought Nora canned goods twice. She was 70, weathered, and had opinions about everything. Marge looked at Marcus, looked at Nora, looked at the single mattress. "Honey," Marge said, pouring herself coffee without being asked, "that man looks at you the way my second husband looked at a rare steak. You need to tire him out." "Excuse me?" Men like that. Military, all discipline. Big feelings they don't know where to put. They'll run from you until they can't run anymore. So you exhaust him. Make it so his body needs you more than his pride needs distance. He'll stop fighting it. Nora stared at her. "That is the most insane advice I've ever received. My second marriage lasted 31 years. He died in my arms. I know what I'm talking about." Marge stood. "There's a storm coming tonight. Big one. Use it." She left. That night, the storm hit. Wind screaming against the walls. Snow piling against the door. The fire was the only light, copper and shifting, and Marcus was sitting against the wall sharpening his knife when Nora walked across the cabin, took the knife out of his hand, set it on the floor, and straddled his lap. He caught her hips. "Nora, shut up." She kissed him hard. He resisted for about 3 seconds. Then his hands were in her hair, and he was kissing her back with a ferocity that made her dizzy. She didn't let him set the pace this time. She undressed him by the fire, piece by piece, kissing every scar, and when he tried to take control, she pushed him back down. "My turn," she said. He surrendered. She learned the map of his body, where pressure made him gasp, where her mouth made him swear, where tenderness made him close his eyes and grip the mattress with white knuckles. She took him apart until he was shaking, and then she brought him back, and then she took him apart again. Afterward, he didn't leave. He couldn't. He lay on his back with his arm around her head on his chest, and she felt the exact moment his body gave up its vigilance and sank into sleep. Deep sleep. The kind he hadn't had in months. She could tell because the lines on his face smoothed and his breathing became even and slow, and he held her tighter without waking. In the morning, he was still there. She stirred, and his arm tightened. "Stay," he mumbled. Then, more clearly, "Please." She stayed. "When you want to get up," he said, "tell me. I'll let go." Not yet. The 6th night, his leg was worse. The scar had reopened fully, a dark seam weeping fluid, and the skin around it was hot. Not his normal furnace heat, but the wrong kind, feverish, angry. He tried to hide it. She found the blood on the sleeping bag when he was outside with Bishop. She waited until he came in and sat him down and unwrapped the bandage without asking permission. The wound was infected, red streaks running up toward his hip. "When were you going to tell me?" she said, and the cold in the cabin hummed at a pitch she'd never heard before. Higher, thinner, alarming. "It's fine. It's sepsis in about 48 hours. She rummaged through her pack and found the bottle of prescription-grade antibiotics she'd been carrying since Portland. Amoxicillin, prescribed for a dental infection she'd never had. She'd faked the symptoms to build a medical supply kit before going into hiding. Victor's people knew she had chronic tooth issues. The prescription was bulletproof. She held up the bottle. "Take 2. Now. Where did you get antibiotics? I'm a woman who planned for the worst. Take them." He took them. She cleaned the wound with boiled water and repacked it, and her hands were steady the whole time, but inside the high-pitched hum of the cold was screaming. She could not lose him. She could not lose another person. That night she held him while fever sweat soaked through his shirt, and Bishop pressed against his other side, and the 3 of them formed a single unit of warmth against the howling dark. On the 8th day the fever broke. Marcus sat up clear-eyed and said, "Tell me everything." So she did. Victor Cahill, the pension fund, the $195 million in bearer bonds behind the cabin wall, David's murder, the frame job. Victor had used her digital signature, her access codes, her face on security footage he'd doctored. There was a federal warrant with her name on it. "But I have proof," she said. She pulled out a flash drive from the lining of her coat. David copied Victor's private server before he died. Every transaction, every forged document. The original showing Victor's authorization, not mine. I've had it for 3 months. I just couldn't get to anyone who'd believe me. Why not? Because Victor Cahill is Congressman Richard Hale's largest donor. Marcus went absolutely still. "Richard Hale," he said, "your father-in-law." The silence was enormous. The cold filled it. "You knew," Marcus said. "You knew who I was. Not at first. I figured it out on the 2nd day. Your military ID, your last name, the fact that you were walking through a blizzard 17 miles from the Hale estate, and you didn't tell me. What was I supposed to say? Your dead wife's father is funding the man who destroyed my life." He stood up, walked to the window. Bishop tracked him but didn't follow. "Richard Hale funded Lily's treatment," Marcus said. His voice was very quiet. "When the military coverage ran out, he paid for the last 3 months of her care. I owed him everything. That's why I let them take the house, the money. I thought I owed him. You don't owe him anything. He's been laundering money through Victor for 6 years. He needed you out of the family because you're the only person with enough credibility to take him down." A decorated Delta Force veteran raising questions about his father-in-law? That's a news story. That's a congressional hearing. They didn't kick you out because you weren't good enough. They kicked you out because you were too dangerous to keep. Marcus's hands were on the windowsill, and she could see them shaking. "I have one more thing," Nora said. "David's files include communications between Victor and Richard. Direct, explicit. Richard authorized the frame. Your name is in the documents, Marcus." Richard wrote to Victor, "Hale is a liability. Remove his support structure. Make him irrelevant." That was 2 weeks before they went to court to evict you. Marcus didn't move. The cold hummed. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because you were the only person in 11 days who looked at me and didn't see a criminal. Because you came through that door dying and you still asked my permission to stay. Because you held my hand, and I was terrified that if you knew the truth, you'd look at me the way everyone else does." He turned from the window, crossed the cabin, stood in front of her. "How could I not love you more?" he said. "You saved my life. You saved my leg. You're about to save my name, and you thought the truth would make me leave? Everyone leaves. I don't." He kissed her forehead, then her mouth. Then he pulled back and she saw his face change, the color draining, his hand going to his left thigh. "Marcus? Hello." He stopped. Not by choice. His eyes lost focus. His leg buckled. He went down hard, and this time when he hit the floor, the sound was wrong. Heavy final, the sound of a body shutting down. "Marcus." She dropped beside him. His skin was burning. The infection hadn't broken. It had retreated and resurged, and the red streak she'd seen on his thigh now ran past his hip toward his torso. The antibiotics had bought time, not a cure. Bishop, stay. The dog was frantic, circling. Nora grabbed the antibiotics and forced 2 more into Marcus's mouth with melted snow. She stripped the bandage. The wound was angry, swollen, the tissue around it dark. She needed a hospital. She needed a phone. She needed anything other than a frozen cabin and a hatchet and a bottle of pills. She grabbed the flash drive. She grabbed the hatchet. She pulled on her coat. Then she heard the trucks. 2 of them, grinding up the frozen trail. Victor's men, but not just his men this time. Through the frosted window, she saw Victor Cahill himself stepping out of the lead vehicle, collar turned up against the wind, and beside him, white-haired and rigid with authority, Congressman Richard Hale. Nora looked at Marcus on the floor. She looked at the flash drive in her hand. She looked at Bishop. She opened the door and walked outside. "There she is," Victor said. He was smiling. He had the kind of face that looked reasonable in photographs and reptilian in person. "Nora Fielding, federal fugitive. We've been looking for you." "I know you have, Victor. That's why I have copies." His smile faltered. "Copies of everything," she said. "David's files, your server backups, every wire transfer, every forged signature, every communication between you and the congressman. I mailed copies to 3 separate attorneys before I came here. If I don't check in within 24 hours, they go to the FBI, the DOJ, and the New York Times." That was a lie. She hadn't mailed anything. But Victor didn't know that. Richard Hale stepped forward. "Young woman, I don't know what Marcus has told you, but he's unstable, a grief-stricken man with a history of—" "He told me about Lily," Nora said. "He told me she died holding his hand. He told me you paid for her treatment. He didn't tell me you did it to keep him compliant. I figured that out myself." Richard's face tightened. "This is absurd." "Is it?" Marge's voice came from the tree line. Nora turned. The old ranger was standing at the edge of the clearing with a satellite phone in one hand and a shotgun in the other. "Because I've been listening to your frequency for 3 days, Congressman. You really should encrypt your radio communications. I called the county sheriff 20 minutes ago, and the FBI field office in Cheyenne. They're all on their way." Victor looked at Richard. Richard looked at Victor. "This is a misunderstanding," Victor said. But his voice had changed. The confidence was gone. "Let me help you understand," Marge said. "I spent 30 years in federal service. I know exactly what $195 million in bearer bonds hidden on federal land looks like. I know what a frame job smells like. And I know what 2 men driving up a mountain to threaten a woman and a dying soldier looks like. It looks like conspiracy, obstruction, and if that man inside dies because you delayed his medical care, it looks like murder." Victor's men shifted. One of them put his hands up. "I want an attorney," Victor said. "You're going to need several." Marge tossed Nora the satellite phone. "Call for a medevac. Now." Nora caught it and dialed. Behind her, she heard Victor talking fast, bargaining, trying to redirect blame to Richard. Richard cut him off. "Shut up, Victor. Shut up." The congressman's voice was ice. "This was your operation, your fund, your scheme. You authorized every transfer." Victor hissed. "Your signature is on the offshore accounts. You think I'm going down alone? I think you're a fool. And I think you threw your own son-in-law into the snow because he was inconvenient. What kind of man does that? He loved your daughter. He raised your granddaughter. And you threw him away." Richard said nothing. His silence was its own confession. The sheriff's vehicles arrived 18 minutes later. The FBI helicopter landed in the clearing 40 minutes after that. Victor Cahill was arrested on federal charges of embezzlement, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Congressman Richard Hale was arrested on charges of conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. Both were cuffed in the snow while Nora watched from the cabin doorway. The medevac took Marcus and Bishop to Cheyenne Regional Medical Center. Nora rode with them, holding Marcus's hand while the paramedics worked on his leg. His fingers were limp in hers. His face was gray. "Stay," she whispered. "Please." The surgery took 4 hours. The infection had nearly reached his hip joint. They saved the leg. They saved him. Nora sat in the waiting room with Bishop at her feet, and Marge beside her drinking terrible hospital coffee. The FBI agents took her statement. She gave them the flash drive. She showed them where the bonds were hidden. She told them everything. The warrant for her arrest was vacated within 72 hours. Every charge dropped. A formal apology was issued by the U.S. Attorney's Office, though Nora suspected the word apology did more work than the people who wrote it. Victor Cahill pled guilty to 14 federal counts and was sentenced to 23 years. Richard Hale fought the charges for 6 months before a jury convicted him on all counts. 12 years. He died in prison 14 months later. Heart attack. No one from his family attended the funeral. Marcus woke on the second day. Nora was asleep in the chair beside his bed, Bishop's head on her lap. He reached over and touched her hair, and she woke to his eyes, clear, focused, warm. "I didn't finish," he said. "Finish what?" "I love you." He said it complete, whole. No collapse, no interruption. "I love you, Nora. I have loved you since you lowered a hatchet because a stranger's dog didn't deserve to lose his person. I have loved you in a frozen cabin and a fever and the worst pain of my life, and none of it touched what I felt when you walked outside to face them alone. You are the bravest person I have ever known, and I have been to war." Nora pressed her forehead to his hand. Tears ran down her face and she let them. "I love you too," she said. "You impossible man." Bishop put his paw on the bed. Marcus scratched his ears with his free hand. Outside the hospital window, the Wyoming sky was pale blue, and the cold had no sound at all. 6 months later, they stood on the porch of a cabin in the Wind River Range, a real one, with insulation and running water and a nursery painted yellow. Nora held a mug of coffee in both hands. Marcus stood behind her, his arms around her waist, his chin on her head. Bishop lay at their feet in a patch of sunlight. "The hearing is Tuesday," she said. "I know. They want me to testify again. I know that too. Will you come?" He pressed his mouth to her hair. "I will be in that room every second. And if anyone looks at you sideways, Bishop and I will handle it." She turned in his arms, put her hands on his chest, felt the scars under his shirt and the heartbeat beneath them, steady, strong, hers. "Tell me something," she said. "Anything. When you walked into that cabin, what did you hear?" He was quiet for a moment. "The cold," he said. "It had a sound, this low hum, everywhere. Do you hear it now?" He listened. Wind in the pines. Bishop's breathing. The coffee maker clicking off inside. "No," he said. "I hear you." She kissed him in the sunlight, and the world was warm, and the silence was the kind that holds you up instead of pressing down. If this story moved you, leave a comment with the word you'd use to describe what Marcus and Nora found in that cabin. Subscribe for more stories of people who refuse to break, no matter what the cold throws at them. And hit the bell so you never miss another one.